All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Tony Tata, who's a Brigadier General, U.S. Army retired. I hear him as Tony Tata on the radio. I hear him as Anthony J. Tata performing the duties of the Undersecretary of Defense. And then there's A.J. Tata, the thriller author. So we talk to you today with all of those different roles in your life in mind. And we're going to spend a few minutes here today talking about what's going on in the Trump transition, because I have a feeling you are in the thick of it.
Well, I don't know about that. If I'm asked to serve, I'll gladly serve for the president again. And if not, I'll gladly support everyone who is serving because I believe in the agenda and the focus that the president has on what's right for our country.
What do you make of the Pentagon top job going to a guy who's not a bureaucrat, who doesn't know much about managing large organizations? Pete.
Yeah, well, I think Pete Hegseth is a great pick. I like Pete. I know him personally. I've done TV with him quite a bit. He's a deep thinker. He's a thoughtful guy. And like I tell anybody when I'm talking about leadership or when I talk to big organizations, small organizations, you have to love the people you lead. If you don't start there, you will never get the ship sailing right. And the one thing you can count on with Pete Hegseth is that he cares deeply about the men and women in uniform, those that are serving, National Guard, active and reserve, and those that have served are veterans. And so he's got the right foundation. And he's a deep thinker about all of this. He's a Princeton grad. He's a Harvard grad. So that should scratch the itch of all the people saying, well, he's not a retired four-star. He's not a former Raytheon or big defense board member. He's not a former Silver Spoon think tank guy. Well, all that's good for a president who's looking to reform the DOD and be able to implement his vision. Remember, Victoria, just a few days ago, CNN broke a story that generals were plotting how to not execute the commands, the directives of the new commander-in-chief, President Donald J. Trump. I mean, that's insubordination at a minimum. And so he's putting a guy in there, Pete's a major in the National Guard. And so, these generals are going to break out in hives when they have to report to him. And there is a current strain of general officer and flag officer in the military right now that actually believes they know better than the political civilian control of the military, which our Constitution is founded on, because our framers knew better than to put a bunch of generals in charge, and that you had to have political, military, or civilian control of the military. So, but you have generals right now, right today, that are plotting not to do what President Trump tells them to do.
What should he do in that case? If he gets wind of, I know CNN reported on this meeting, I know that it was so bad that even the Lloyd Austin, the Pentagon chief, had to say, hey guys, you need to follow the orders, the lawful orders of the president. Was that some mixed message, or was that a legit message from a guy who's worried about such the generals running roughshod over Trump again?
I mean, I know Lloyd Austin very well. I worked for him twice, served with him 3 times. That's Lloyd Austin covering his ass. Yeah, he wants no part of that. He's pardon my French, but Lloyd Austin commands up and Lloyd Austin takes care of Lloyd Austin, and that's him protecting his flank, saying, "I got nothing to do with this, guys," because he knows that an investigation is going to come, and he knows that Trump's already talking about setting up this review board to take a look at where this is coming from, who's stoking it, and all that simply is Lloyd Austin being Lloyd Austin. He wants to get out, get that $15 million a year job with one of the big defense companies, and be done with it. He doesn't want any legal fees chasing him.
Mm-hmm. Well, he'll just probably go back to Raytheon, right? Isn't that where he came from right away?
well, like I say to everybody, General Austin served his nation honorably as a soldier. Mm-hmm. As a secretary, he's got a different track record, and he owns the DEI and the CRT, the Afghanistan failure, the Ukraine failure, the Israel failure. He owns all that. That's on him. Mm-hmm. And he owns contributing to decision making in the National Command Authority about removing the Houthis from the designated terror list, and removing maximum pressure on Iran, removing the Abraham Accords. He owns that. He owns a piece of that anyway. It was the president's decision, but this DOD is in serious need of reform. I saw it when I performed the duties as the Undersecretary for Policy, that you had generals that believed that they did not have to do what the political leadership was telling them to do, to include the commander-in-chief, and it was insubordination. And so these generals should probably be a little bit nervous right now. I would suspect they are, if they're still in, and I know some that are, and they know who they are and they know what they've done, and I would suspect that they're part of these conversations.
In addition to the fact that I hear you interviewed on the radio in Washington, D.C. a lot, I did especially get, you got my attention again. Saturday night, we are listening on X to a discussion by national security types in a space about this meeting of the Pentagon people. And I just wanted to get your thoughts about what Trump can do about people who will not carry out his orders besides this overview, this regulatory or board that you're talking about. How can he fix that?
Well, I mean, we have the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We have, if someone refuses to obey an order or is more surreptitious about it and tries to undermine the order, it's insubordination. You can do investigations. You can lock people down as far as career progression. You can demote them. You can have extrajudicial action through the Inspector General. You can do lots of different things to send a very clear message to a lot of these generals that are filled with hubris. And part of the problem, because I was a general, and a lot of these 4 stars and 3 stars, all they've ever done, Victoria, is be in the Army or Navy or Marine Corps or Air Force, and that's great. Public service, serving the country, defending the country, all of that is magnificent, but they do not have the other skill sets that come with financial or agriculture or energy and all the deep thinking. There are equal career fields that are parallel to a military career in every business vertical, and that's what a lot of them don't really realize. They kind of get this siloed view that their way is the only way, and they kind of become Patton-esque in their belief that only they are right, and there's everything revolves around the military. No, the military is that big stick that Teddy Roosevelt talked about, and you have that ready, but if you're using it all the time, then you're doing something wrong in the other direction with your other levers of power, your diplomacy, your information messaging, your economy, your agriculture, your technology. Yeah. And so a lot of these senior leaders don't realize how hard it is to run a business because they're insulated from all of that when they're in the military, and they, it's kind of a conveyor belt. You do your 2 or 3 year command, then you go do a staff, then you do another command, and mistakes are pretty significantly underwritten. Just look how nobody was held accountable for Afghanistan. I mean, and it's like, well, Austin underwrote all that. He said, it doesn't matter if you kill people. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes where people are killed, where good Americans are killed. It's okay. You'll get promoted. You'll be just fine. Don't worry about it. And in no business vertical that I've been in, and I've been in business now for a while, is that okay? It's just anathema to the way the world works. So
what about the interagency groups that are at the Pentagon and in other areas of the executive branch where they have more control than the president?
Well, I would say states probably famous for that. And you have, all these entrenched, not only is it the active duty, reserve, National Guard, senior flag officers across all 5 services, but you have the senior executive services, and they're almost as troublesome because they fly under the radar. They are highly immune to any kind of disciplinary action and oversight. And Reagan said, the second best thing to being immortal is having a government job. Well, if you're an SES in the government job, you're in the government, you are practically immortal as far as your professional life goes. And so, yes.
If you've been caught giving away secrets and or disobeying orders, etc., would one tack be to, in addition to being fired, removing your national security clearance so that you can't use it to make more money? I mean,
they ought to have clearances pulled. They ought to be disciplined. They ought to be fined. If it's serious enough, they ought to be put in jail. This security state needs to be dismantled in a big way. The Patriot Act has been abused in a way that no right-thinking American should condone. And honestly, what has transpired here is that the Democrat Party has become the party of big government, big security state, use techno-fascism, the combination between technology, legacy media, and government to put their jackboot on the neck of the little guy and gal, and that's why Trump won so resoundingly, is that people from all walks of life saw this is not America. A 30-year-old White House guy eating a cheeseburger, calling up somebody in San Francisco at Twitter headquarters saying, hey, block these 32 people. We don't like what they're saying. And then Twitter doing that.
Yeah.
That is the epitome. That guy ought to be held accountable. That guy ought to be dragged in front of a court. Everything
Elvis
that
Chan
guy did,
or Yoel Roth. Those are the people you're talking to.
Right. Whomever does it, and I'm not naming names. I'm just saying that
they're in the Twitter files. Everybody knows their names.
Right, exactly. So, all those people they're criminals in my mind because they're acting against the Constitution and the will of the American people.
I couldn't agree more. And we have you for maybe a couple more minutes here, and I just wanted to find out from you what you believe the biggest threat to America is internally and externally.
So internally, Victoria, we were just talking about it. I think it's the corruption of the techno-fascist state. I think it's big tech and big government and legacy media coming together to be oppressive against the American people. Externally, I think that what Lloyd Austin and Tony Blinken have artfully been able to do is drive all our enemies together to cooperate together against our national interests, which is Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And so what we must do is go back to a vital interest-based thought process where we say, here are the vital U.S. interests that we have, and here's how we're going to defend them, and here's how we're going to shape a defense institution to do that. And nuclear weapon control, weapons of mass destruction is up there. Free flow of oil for economic purposes is up there. Those kinds of things. Stability in Europe's up there, but is it below the line, above the line for committing American troops? Those are discussions that need to be had. But this formation of alliance of our enemies is the number one threat that we face externally. Techno-fascism is the number one threat we face internally.
Tony Blinken, the worst SOS ever.
Yeah, him and Lloyd make a good worst ever couple. I mean, it's really amazing how fundamentally how bad every foreign policy decision has turned out, whether it was Afghanistan, which led to Russia, Ukraine, which led to Israel, and when they relieved maximum pressure on Iran and did the Abraham Accords, every single decision they made at the macro level led to colossal failures, and our interests being served less than served more.
We have 1 minute left with you. Is overclassification the biggest issue? I mean, it just sort of a nuts and bolts everyday life in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue, and it's a way, Victoria, that the Joint Staff hides information from civilian leadership, political leadership. They classify things, even though, like I was a super user, we found people classifying things in ways that wouldn't be passed to me as the number 3 guy in the Pentagon. What is the Joint Staff doing that they don't want me to know about, right? And so I'm very confident with the team that I believe is going to come in there, guys like Ezra Cohen and so forth, that those kinds of issues will be nipped squarely in the bud.
Okay, we're going to let you go, but I just wanted to say thank you for coming on. And next time, we will talk about your books, the latest one of which is the Phalanx Code, and it's under A.J. Tata, and you write in 3 different universes of your own making, right? So that's amazing.
Yeah, no, I love being a fiction novelist. It's just one aspect of my life, but absolutely enjoy it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Victoria.
We were talking, offline during this meeting on Saturday night because, we have lives. We see a notification on Twitter, formerly Twitter and now X, for a Spaces, which includes discussion of this meeting that CNN pointed out to and said that it happened wherein a lot of the generals and people got together, these, bona fide big shots got together and were conversing over, how will we not follow the rules, the laws, the orders of the president? And this is the way it started. Now, check this out. This is the CNN version. I have my own colleagues over at Town Hall who put their different spin on it, which is to say, this sounds like an insurrection to us. And these guys actually do have guns. So it starts out, Pentagon officials are holding informal discussions about how the Department of Defense would respond if Donald Trump issues orders to deploy active duty troops domestically and fire large swaths of apolitical staffers, defense officials told CNN. Donald Trump is talking about plussing up troops at the border to stop the invasion. That would also, of course, stop the killing of Americans to a large extent, probably, because it would halt, hopefully, the amount of fentanyl being brought into the country. And who's making the fentanyl? By the way, who's cooking the fentanyl? Who's cooking the fentanyl? Not only precursor chemicals, but who's bringing that fentanyl and precursor chemicals to Mexico, to where the cartels have control over the manufacturing processes? That's right, China. This is a national security issue. If you can't secure your own borders, then do you have a country? So this is this meeting that was being held at the Pentagon and discussing ways in which if the president gives them an order with which they disagree, then of course we will have to do something to countermand it, talk them out of it, or just ignore it altogether. And this, of course, this happened with the force reduction in Syria during the president's first term, during Trump's first term, wherein he told his Pentagon to get the soldiers out of Syria because we'd already vanquished ISIS. We had taken away their caliphate, and we had diminished them to the point where they were running around with their tails between their legs and not in any way, shape, or form a lethal threat to the United States. So what happened was they ignored that order. And I just want you to know what real world effects that has on actual people. And I go to Joe Kent, the former Green Beret CIA special operator, whose wife was on the ground working with a special operations unit as an intel person. She was also, I don't remember all the jot and tittle, but she was with a special operations group. So she's, on her own level of badass. And she was killed in an IED attack because someone decided to blow up troops that were not even supposed to be there. That's what happens when you don't follow orders of the President of the United States. Sure, you get some dumb skulls in there who don't know what they're talking about, but nevertheless, that's a real-world reaction to what happens when you don't pay attention and take care with what you've been told to do. So these Pentagon birds, they get together, and I mean birds, I guess, literally and figuratively, and they decide, hey, well, what are we going to do here? Officials are now, CNN continues to report, gaming out various scenarios as they prepare for an overhaul of the Pentagon. We are preparing and planning for a worst-case scenario, but the reality is we don't know how this is going to play out, said one defense official anonymously to CNN. Trump's election has also raised questions inside the Pentagon about what would happen if the president issued an unlawful order, particularly if his political appointees inside the department don't push back. Now, this drips with irony. To me, as just a guy out here in the world, a person who pays more attention than the average bear, I laugh at that. An unlawful order. I'd like to know what unlawful order they were ever asked to do prior to that. But let me ask you this. What was Afghanistan then? What was the pullout of Afghanistan? Now, we'll talk to Tony Tata again. When he was number 3 in the Pentagon, and of course being a general for 25 years, being in the intelligence as well as defense space for the better part of 30 years, plus he also worked in the outside world and did amazing things with school reform, if you can believe that. The guy's just amazingly talented. They left standing orders on how one goes about leaving Afghanistan. They didn't follow those orders. Those were orders. Now, sure, Joe could have just countermanded them, but wouldn't there be like a paper trail of some sort, right? Or some trail of something? And the reason I bring it up is because it was such a colossal failure. Indeed, Tony Tata says that the standing order in Afghanistan was that everyone, that meant our NATO allies who were, by the way, left high and dry, our assets in the region, all of the people, they would then go to Bagram Air Force Base and that huge city state that lies in Afghanistan outside of, not too far away from Kabul. And everyone would be there and then depart from there. Now let's go over the tally sheet of what happened in Afghanistan when these self-same Pentagon brainiacs decided to ignore those standing rules, changed up everything, went totally bespoke and said, okay, well, we're just going to yank everyone out of there. And oh, by the way, we're going to go to Kabul Airport, the one that's in the middle of the city surrounded by bad actors. Are you freaking kidding me? So please, 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 do not preach to me. Do not expect anyone in the sphere of this story who knows more than the average person at home. Don't even go there with me if you think that, oh gosh, we're going to be so scandalized if the president asks us to do something that's illegal. What was Afghanistan? That not only, maybe it was a legal order. How stupid. How about Lloyd Austin? You coward. You go to the commander-in-chief. You know that guy? Oh, sure, he can't think. He goes to bed at 4:00 in the afternoon. What about going to him and say, here's the plan. We've already gamed this out. Biggest brains in Washington, D.C. for years have been figuring out how the hell we're going to get out of there. And what does he do? They didn't do that. Oh, yes, sir, Mr. President, sir. We're going to do that. We're just going to pull the plug. It's like all of a sudden you go, well, we're out of here. Punch the button, turn off the lights, and leave. And what did we leave? Billions of dollars. And what did we do? We left our friends to fend for themselves so that the folks in the Taliban, there's little special operators over there, using our equipment now, have systematically gone through and picked off all of the people with whom we'd been working. That's not what a hegemon does. That's not what a fair-minded United States of America does for its friends. And that's what you do to enemies. Okay, that's what you do to enemies. Worse, gets worse. Then what are we doing? We pay between, because it's hard to get the numbers, $40 and $80 million every week to the Taliban. Why? Plane comes in, bags of money. Maybe it's to wired accounts. I'm told it's money. And then they dole it out to their buddies. Those people are not our friends. They are not our friends. And my understanding is that some of the top people in the Taliban right now have the last names of bin Laden. Come on. I will say Tony Tata was nice in his assessment of Tony Blinken's, the Secretary of State's, job as Secretary of State in this space. He's the guy who brought us, he and the Hillary Clinton, Jake Sullivan Nimrod. Of course, Nimrod was a king and he was actually pretty smart, but you catch when I'm thrown down. And those guys wrote the Iran plan to get nuclear weapons for Iran. They wrote that plan. Barack Obama blessed it, made sure it happened. They tried to reconstitute it under Trump in one of those pieces of paper. I've heard Tony Tata talk about this. He's the third guy at the Pentagon. And he gets this information. When he comes back on, we're going to talk about this. He gets this information, these documents, and he reads them. And he finds out that, all those people, the interagency people, the high staffing folks, people with lots of fruit salad, and lots of bars and, scrambled eggs and all stuff, they had rewritten the orders and reconstituted the Iran nuke plan. And they wanted him to sign it. This is under Trump. They did this. They went around. Now remember when they slow rolled the Syrian pullout, and of course, people were killed. You had amazing people killed, just stupidly. So they're all worried. Oh, they're gaming out various scenarios as they prepare for an overhaul of the Pentagon. I know. Why don't you just sit there and wait to find out if your number comes up? How's that? You're probably, and if you're asking these questions, If you're wondering, oh my gosh, are they going to find out about this meeting? Are they going to find out who populated the meeting? Are they going to find out, make sure nobody signed anything, or your IP's not on the meeting for the whatever service you use, so they can go back and find out who was in the meeting. If you're worried about that, you probably should be gone. And you know what? Here's the best part. These are the people who should have their security clearances removed, so they can't trot it out and monetize it in the world after the Pentagon, where they have absolutely made the world a less safe place. And America, not just a former hegemon, but crawling in the corner, afraid of China. These are the people who need to go. They need to go. If you're worried because you were in that meeting, just remove yourself now. Just go easy on everybody. Just say, hey, I was in that meeting and I can't follow the president's order. Currently, right now, that there has been a change in the law under Joe Biden, which allows the military to shoot people like us, just, inside the United States. And it sort of slid through, and the news media, of which I'm a part, we saw the story, and that was going, what the heck is he setting us up for now? And so you just wonder. I don't know what the plan for that was, what the idea, the ways in which the milieu in which that all came down. But I do know this, that the state of play has changed, and we need to get right with who the American people are. And, let me just say this before we go. Here's the thing. In the United States of America, if you don't know this now, you will. This is such an unusual form of government. We ideally, not always, but ideally, what happens is the Constitution is a document which spells out indeed how the government is to be set up, but also gives out, and thank God they did this later, because some of the states weren't going to buy in unless the founders put in the rules of the road, the individual acts of the rights that you can't do. No, it's the right that the United States government can't do against you. You cannot interfere with someone's ability to meet with people, speechify on a soapbox. The government is not supposed to interfere in this Bill of Rights they spelled out with your ability to carry a gun. There is no law that is allowed to keep you from owning and carrying a gun. And we just found that out again recently. You can worship as you will. All of these things, in the point of that little, sidebar is the fact that the unique thing about the United States form of government is that the individual is at the center. The individual is at the center. It's the things that the government cannot do against you. Everything else that's around is done for your benefit, not theirs. They go and they make the world a less safe place, these folks at the Pentagon. Shame on them. Now they're worried that their asses might be kicked out of the Pentagon. Well, I hope you are worried about that. You certainly have not had, by and large, the benefit of the individual in your mind, the hegemony of the United States in the world you don't have in mind. You sold out. Shame on you. The enemy from within is what the president-elect calls it. That's Donald Trump. He calls it the enemy within, and they're all scared. Oh, how dare he speak of the enemy within? Of course, notwithstanding the fact that if people like you and me, we've been the enemy within, according to the IC community, DHS, CIA, FBI. All of a sudden, those things turned on the individual, turned on the American public. So they're offended and affronted by the fact that the president calls some of them the enemy within. Let me tell you something. What do you think has been happening to Donald Trump for the past multiple years? Multiple efforts to destabilize him, bankrupt him, put him in prison for what? Trumped up charges. This is the funny thing about the classified question, the classified document question I was asking Tony Tata. And it was this, is there overclassification, is that an issue? And the reason I even brought it up is because it was a huge issue during the Spaces discussion on Saturday night. Because there's so much that they make classified, so you can't keep track of them and there's no transparency. And yet even though President Trump at the time was able to classify documents, that's what he is. You know who the ultimate classifier of documents is? Yeah, the president. That's right, the president. They go in there and say, oh, you can't have these documents. Melania Trump, her underwear drawer was gone through because the FBI wanted to find out if she had any classified documents, to which she was probably allowed to have, and in her underwear drawer. And you know what? That's the reason she's not meeting with Jill Biden. She goes, these people have done nothing but bring grief on my family. There's one thing about it. My husband has to meet with Joe. Fine. I'm not meeting with his wife, who's the one cheering this on. And bravo, Melania. Man, that woman, she's got some titanium in her spine. Okay, so all of this to say, things are getting interesting. The national security team that the president-elect is surrounding himself with look pretty good. I'm not so sure about Marco Rubio at state. I mean, what? I don't know. I know he's a Russia hawk. Got it. Great. But so we'll see how it goes. National Security Advisor Mike Walls looks pretty good. I'm pretty excited about that. So we'll just keep it up. We'll just keep telling you about it. And why don't you do this for me? Would you please subscribe, share with your friends, share on social media, the Adult in the Room podcast? Because if nobody can find us, hey, what good is spending all our time talking about these issues if nobody's going to find us and talk about it and listen and learn a little bit? So I appreciate if you do that. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen. And give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1A Cast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.